Right, this week we're doing Balak. If you've ever heard anything about Balak, you'll see why this picture is relevant. But if you haven't got a clue, you'll see later. Right. This week we find the children of Israel camped in the plains of Moab, which is modern-day Jordan, just across the Jordan River from the land promised to the patriarchs. They're in the final stages of the journey through the wilderness. Okay? Now, Israel, for all this Torah portion, will be oblivious to most of the incidents we read about. Balak, the king of Moab, considers the Israelites to be a threat since their recent victories in battle have earned them the reputation of being invincible. Balak decides that instead of warring against this nation, he will attempt to fight Israel by means of spiritual powers. He attempts to enlist the help of a well-known prophet from Mesopotamia known as Balaam. Who's phoning me? Oh, I don't even know. It's a 02 something number, I have no idea. Okay, right. Why name a Torah portion after Balak? What if we all are individually and collectively destined to encounter Balak in the course of our respective journeys? Maybe we need to recognize him. Okay, now in the aftermath of the destruction of Sodom's Lot's oldest daughter seduced him into an incestuous encounter, became pregnant by him, and called the child born of the union Moab, which means of the father. And this is the Torah account, Genesis 19. It says, the firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the patriarch, progenitor of the Moab to this day. Do you know the story, yeah? They escape from Sodom and Gomorrah, and there's Lot. His wife dies because she gets turned to a pillar of salt, and he's got his daughters. They get him drunk and sleep with him to carry on his lineage. One of the people that was born from that was Moab, meaning of the father. Moab's descendants thereafter were constantly fighting with the Amorite or the Amorites, who were the descendants of Canaan. And Ammoni or the Ammonites descended also of Lot from his other younger daughter, and they were fighting for supremacy, for control of the eastern bank of the Dead Sea and the Jordan Rift Valley. Now, the next thing the Torah tells us about Balak is that he saw all that Israel had done to the Amori in Numbers 22. Balak, you see, saw only what he wanted to see. He saw what Israel had done to the Amorites, but he chose not to see what brought the crisis about. He's just seeing the Israelites defeating them, not actually seeing the cause of it. He chose not to see that the Amorites had been the unprovoked aggressors and initiators of all the wars the Hebrews fought with them. He chose not to see that the first Israel-Amorite war occurred when Israel sought simply peaceful passage along an established trade route that ran through the land of the Amorites' king Sihon. Sihon not only refused them passage, but also brazenly mustered his entire army and marched out into the desert to attack Israel. That's in Numbers 21. He chose not to see that the second Israeli-Amorite war occurred when the Amorites' king, Og of Bashan, the big huge guy, and his whole army marched out to attack the Hebrews at Esdrai, and that's in Numbers 21, a bit later in 33. Okay, so did what Balak saw Israel do to the Amorites make him personally afraid? Was he scared himself? Okay, it doesn't tell us in the Torah. All it tells us is that somehow when Balak saw whatever he chose to see, the result was that the people of Moab were terrified. As it says, and Moab was filled with dread. They were all freaked out. But you can imagine it, can't you? Think about the victories that the Israelites had had over these giants, the bigwigs in the area. So the people were all looking like this. And I had to put these pictures back up because it gives me a chance to show once again my favourite picture, which is a picture of this chap here, who we all know from last week as Baby Bag Push. But there you go. Right. Balak apparently seized the moment, never waste a good crisis. A good crisis can be used by those seeking power as a means to manipulate people through casting blame, stirring up anger, whipping up old prejudices, spreading lies, and laying the seeds of fear. We see examples of this, don't we, in Pearl Harbor and even more recently 9/11. People in power love crises because it's just an opportunity for them to exert more power and control over people. Okay, so let's have a look at Balaam. He's a strange character in the scriptures. The name Balaam means stopper, and a similar word in modern Hebrew is used to describe the brakes in your car. The purpose of Balaam is to stop or put the brakes on the advance of Jehovah's people towards their grand destiny. Though likely of foreign origin, the name Balaam appears to be related to the Hebrew phrase Balaam, meaning of no nation or not of the people. Balaam appears to have been a cross-culturist, a prototype of the false prophet, of the man of lawlessness. Okay, Daniel 7:25, talking about the man of lawlessness. He shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until the time and times and the dividing of time. Okay, what we've got in this Torah portion is Balak, this king, right, who's totally against the Israelites and wants to crush them for no reason whatsoever. And we've got Balaam, who's this false prophet, and it sets up a picture in our head. Hang on, can we recognize these characters? Because we know Scripture is cyclical. Okay, so what we've got here in Daniel 7:25 is a description of basically the Antichrist, or the little horn power. Speaks words against the Most High, wear out the saints, change times and laws. Who thought to change times and laws? Who also is decked with gold and precious stones and pearls? Okay, well, let's have a look at changing times and laws. And I'm going to pin this on the papacy. They brought us the Gregorian calendar, which completely changed the times. They brought us Sunday worship, okay, changing the times and laws again. They gave us Christmas and Easter. They changed the Ten Commandments. They even changed the way we see a day. In the Hebrew idiom, we start a day in the evening, don't we? They changed all that. They took away the feasts of God and robbed us of the Sabbath. That's what they've given us. They changed times and laws. And there's some little quotes. There's the source. It says, the Pope has power to change times, to abrogate laws, and to dispense with all things, even the precepts of Christ. And another quote, the Pope can modify divine law. So in their own writings, these people are saying, yeah, it's us. We're the ones. If you want to read this Torah portion, you can actually recognize us in it, because we're playing a part. The church, after changing the day of rest from the Jewish Sabbath, or the seventh day of the week, to the first, made the third commandment refer to Sunday as the day to be kept holy as the Lord's day. That's from the Catholic Encyclopedia. In the Convert's Catechism of Catholic Doctrine, the question is, what is the Sabbath day? Answer, Saturday is the Sabbath day. Question, why do you observe Sunday instead of Saturday? Answer, we observe Sunday instead of Saturday because the Catholic Church transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. Okay, changing times and laws. And this thing about times and half a time. Time is a year, 360 days. Times is 2 years, 720. Half a time's 180. Add it up, 1260 days. Prophecy of a day is equal to year, therefore 1260 years. If we look through the history of the world, we can see that the bishop was officially recognized as ruler of Rome 538 AD. The papacy ruled from 538 to 1798 AD, which is 1260 years, because it was brought to an end by Napoleon. Okay, it says here, I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Rome received the mortal wound in 1798, which was healed when the papacy regained power in 1929, when Mussolini gave the Vatican back to the Pope and established it as a country in its own right in the Lateran Treaty. Today, the Vatican has formal diplomatic relations with almost every country in the world. Okay, so it was General Berthier who inflicted a deadly wound upon the papacy by taking the Pope captive. There's different varying artists' impressions of that event. And here's some documents which tell us about the Lateran Pact of 1929. There's Mussolini and your Pope reinstating all that they were after in the first place. Papacy gets state in pact with Italy. They also agreed to give them $87.5 million. Don't know what that's all about, but they did. Okay, and it says their dominion will be taken away at the end of time, not until the Ancient of Days has come. Okay, and this bit's great, isn't it? And judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. But until that time, this power is going to be with us and is going to be trying to change times and laws. Okay? Now, we know it's a modern problem because Yeshua says this in Revelation 2. He says about the church of Pergamos, I have a few things against you because you have those there who hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols and to commit sexual immorality. Repent, or else I will come to you quickly and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the called out ones. Okay, so this is relevant to us. We've got to recognize these characters, Balak and Balaam. We've got to recognize them because they're going to be around in our day, because it tells us so in the scriptures. Balaam certainly can be said as well to be the forerunner of the demagogues today who advocate that everyone unite across national and linguistic lines, citizens of the planet of the earth type of people, like the European Union or the United Nations. Remember, he was not of the people. He kind of mixed himself about with everybody. This philosophy, though it disguises itself as wisdom and masquerades as a spiritual vehicle for world peace, necessarily requires its advocates to rebel against what Jehovah decreed at the Tower of Babel, that mankind would be scattered and divided. Okay, so it's rebellion. The move toward one world government and a one world religion is all in rebellion against what God decreed. And they're so obvious about it. This is a United Nations, European Union poster. They even have the picture of the Tower of Babel there, as well as obviously the Star of Baphomet. There's an old painting from Brugge, however you spell his name, Bruegel. So they've even modelled it on that, and this is the European Union Parliament in Strasbourg, also modelled on the Tower of Babel. So they're making it quite clear what their intentions are, not trying to hide it at all. Okay, here we've got Time magazine saying, "Back to Babel, a special report on globalisation." Okay, and this poster here says it says that the Euro was never meant to succeed. It was meant to fail because they want order out of chaos. And after World War III will come the New World Order. This is obviously some magazine's idea of what's going on. Balaam represents and foreshadows the coming one world order and coming one world religion, messengers of false hope, false love and false peace. He and all who are like him eloquently spout high-sounding religious talk and attract many adherents. The one thing about Balaam that you'll notice through this Torah portion is he doesn't mind mixing in a bit of pagan stuff. He hears from the Lord and he seems to have a relationship with Jehovah, but he doesn't mind doing all the pagan stuff. Okay? And I've just put some things up which I still can't get my head around. People talking about Chrislam, the Pope kissing the Quran. Rick Warren says Pope Francis is the Pope of all Christians worldwide. Okay, I'll beg to differ, but the God of life leads us to justice and peace. It's this whole thing, isn't it? It all sounds lovely and high and mighty, peace and love and everybody joined together. It's absolutely disgusting. It's got nothing to do with the Lord whatsoever. Okay, Pope Francis and Rick Warren to unite for global Chrislam conference. Lovely. Totally in rebellion against the Lord. All the world religions are actually joining together. There's the Pope with Yasser Arafat. That shows you something, doesn't it, about where they're coming from. And this is a man, by the way, who's got the world, he's got the adulation of the world. It's absolutely insane. But he has. Okay, and here we've got a little quiz for you. Which one gets first prize for looking the holiest, / the most ridiculous? Have you seen? Well, I thought this one. I thought he definitely looks the most holy. So. Anyway, the United Nations headquarters to be moved to Israel, that's something to watch out for as well. Because it's not just a one world religion, it's a one world government that they want to bring in as well. Okay. Interestingly, as we mentioned before, the Pope will visit the White House, then address the United States Congress in Washington, D.C. on the 23rd of September of this year. Okay, so this is the Pope. Why is he doing this? What has he got involved in this? On September the 25th, he will address the United Nations General Assembly in New York, where he'll have the spotlight on the official launching and opening day of what is being called the Post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. Okay, this is basically the New World Order that he wants to bring in, and he's right at the head of it. What's he doing right at the head of it? Okay, the Post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. This term is the actual title of an historic one world government contract in plan authored by UN leader, this guy here, Ban Ki-moon, months ago, and has already been emphatically agreed upon behind the scenes by most of all today's world leaders. The actual signing date will take place in New York on this day by the world's leaders, who will officially launch this well-prepared one world government agenda into action, and it will all happen under the Pope's direction, of course. We've got a picture here of the Pope with Ban Ki-moon. Okay, now what is Agenda 21? It proposes an array of actions which are intended to be implemented by every person on the earth. It calls for specific changes in the activities of all people. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all humans, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. Okay, that's from the Earth Press, 1993. That's an article on what Agenda 21 is. It's a big deal, basically. Okay, as one fella said it, he says it is the blueprint for the global communist dictatorship. Okay. Interesting. Balak actually cared more that Israel be cursed if it were possible, because they couldn't be cursed by Jehovah. on their say-so anyway, than that his own household and his own people and his nation be blessed. This just shows you the mentality of this man, doesn't it? He knows that Balaam has the power to bless and he has the power to curse. And that he's more interested in him asking him to curse rather than to bless. There are always multitudes who sit spellbound and listen to the witchcraft these phonies spew and watch their opportunity to embrace the movement of God pass them by. These people don't even know what they're missing the opportunities for. So interested are they in spewing this venom and cursing that they miss an opportunity to be blessed themselves. In contrast, generations after the events we read about this week, another Hebrew, a woman named Naomi, will sojourn in the country of Moab. In that day, one of Balak's descendants, Ruth, will do what Balak and his people did not do. She will embrace the people through whom Jehovah's blessing is promised and designed to come. And according to the Sotar, Ruth was the daughter of King Elgon, who was a descendant of Balak, king of Moab. Okay, and it tells us in Ruth, this is what she says: "Don't entreat me to leave you and to return from following after you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, will I die, and there I will be buried. The Holy One, do so to me, and more also, if anything but death part you and me." Okay, she's a descendant of Balak, but she has a completely different take on things. So rather than wanting to curse the people of Israel, she sees it's where the blessings come from, and she says, I want to be a part of this. Please, I'm coming with you. I'm coming with you. I'm going to leave everything behind, and I'm coming with you. Israel. So what's happening to Israel at this time? They finally march in perfect order, an army majestic with banners. Jehovah their God dwells in their midst, an awe-inspiring pillar of fire and cloud leads them. Manna falls for them from heaven on 6 out of every 7 days, and on the 7th day they enter into a state of rest and peace, so blessed that their faces seem to shine with the glory of heaven. These people are really, really okay this time. Wherever they go, a rock pours forth unending supplies of water for them and their livestock to drink. The people around must have been thinking, what's going on with these people? This is insane. They've been victorious in battle, ridiculously victorious as well. Og of Bashan, who was just enormous. And the Ammonites, the Canaanite armies under the command of King of Arad, the Amorites, the Edomites, the toughest guys in Balak's neighbourhood, all got crushed along with their formidable armies of occupation. And this is beautiful, Psalm 125 verse 2. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people from this time forth and forevermore. Hold on to that, because we might find ourselves in real times of trouble where we're up against giants ourselves. We're up against odds that seem just too ridiculous for us to be able to mount. But remember this: as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people from this time forth forevermore. That means for all time. Okay? With this sudden and dramatic change in the balance of power, there's been mayhem in the area, hasn't it, because of all these wars. Balak saw there was a power vacuum he could manipulate to his advantage. If Balak had only known the will of Jehovah, this was Moab's opportunity to restore its relationship with the God of Abraham and walk again in the blessings of Genesis 12:3. At that time, Jehovah told Abraham, he said, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. In you will all the families of the earth be blessed. Okay? The truth was that Israel was no threat to Moab. The only land the Israelites threatened was the area controlled by the Amorites, the land on the east bank of the Jordan River Valley. Jehovah did not intend for any harm to come to the descendants of Lot, and it tells us that in Deuteronomy 2:9. The Lord actually makes it clear, no, this is for Lot. This is sorted. He's completely all right. Lot's descendants are fine. So we've got a picture of Sodom and Gomorrah, and there we've got the actual place itself, with all the samples of the sulfur in the rock and everything else. I love looking at stuff that's like from the Bible and think, wow, it's amazing. All right, Numbers 22 starts like this. Balak, son of Zippor, saw that all Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was alarmed because the people were so numerous. Moab dreaded the Israelites. Moab said to the elders of Midian, who they're usually in, not very good relations with, now this horde will lick clean all that is about us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. Balak, the son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, in Pethor, which is by the Euphrates, in the land of his kinsfolk, to invite him, saying, there is a people that came out of Egypt. It hides the earth from view, and it is settled next to me. Right, Balak, son of Zippor, it makes me laugh. Balak means terminator, okay? So his name is basically Terminator, son of Zippor. But Zippor actually means little bird. So it's Balak, son of little bird. Okay. Right, Moab and Midian. The one thing these two old enemies agreed about was that under all circumstances, whatever the cost, Israel must be destroyed. Bear in mind that the people of Israel are totally unaware of what has been plotted against them, but Jehovah never slumbers. He sees everything. Often me and JP say, because we hold to the truth and we speak the truth, we're probably the enemy's number one target. Probably can't stand us because we don't listen to the traditions of men or anything. We're just interested in the word of God. And that's what this fellowship is about, isn't it? I just think we must be so hated by the enemy. He must want to attack us so bad. And I think, half the time, we're completely unaware of the protection that God has put upon us. We just think, just going along as normal. We have no idea. I reckon the Lord is protecting us in a mighty way. 6 says, come then, put a curse upon this people for me, since they are too numerous for me. Perhaps I can thus defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed indeed, and he whom you curse is cursed. Rather than say, well, bless us, just no, go curse them. The elders of Moab and the elders of Midian, versed in divination, set out, and they came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message. He said to them, spend the night here, and I shall reply to you as the Lord may instruct me. So the Moabite dignitaries stayed with Balaam. Okay. So the dark side of Balaam's personality won out. He welcomed the men who plotted evil. He listened with rapt attention to their Lashon Hara, and he agreed to consider it. These people have spoke ill of Israel, okay, and he's just lapped it up and listened to it. This is something that we should never be keen to do, to listen to people saying bad things about other people. We say, you've got a problem with them, you go and sort it out, okay? But this is Balaam. You'll see his personality developed through the Torah portion. God said to Balaam, what do these people want of you? Okay, so what question is Jehovah asking you? Bear in mind the question sounds straightforward, but Jehovah's trying to get Balaam to show spiritual discernment with regards to these men. You should have known by the fact that they sought the darker side of his gifting, i.e. cursing, as opposed to blessing. Okay, and it says in verse 10, Balak said to God, Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent me this message. Okay, and the words he uses for cursing, the expression used by Balaam is stronger than the one used by Balak, because it's more specific. Okay, he says he's driving out of the world as opposed to driving them away from me. So what you can read from that is that Balaam hated them more than Balak did. Okay, and there's actually 3 words in Hebrew for curse. Balak asked Balaam to curse, and the word is arah the people. But when Balaam speaks to Jehovah, he says that he's been asked to curse them, as in kavar them. Have I just backed that up? Oh. Right, now, corrected. Sorry. Kalal, okay, this word means to make slight, to make less than, deserved, or divinely intended for the object or person. Arah means to bind, to hem in with obstacles, to render powerless. Kavar means the act of uttering a formula designed to undo its object or person. Quite different, are they? Okay, and it's interesting when you read Genesis 12:3, when it says, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. If you actually look at the Hebrew, it says, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse, i.e. bind and hem in and render powerless, him who curses, i.e. make slight, to make less than deserved by divine or intended for the object or person. So in other words, the people who try to stop you from being what I've purposed you to be, I'll render them powerless. That's what he says when he says, I will curse those who curse you. Okay, but God said to Balaam, do not go with them, you must not curse that people, for they are blessed. It's dead clear. It's so clear. It's such a simple message. It's not clouded in mystery or riddle, is it? So Jehovah speaks to Balaam. In this case, Jehovah gives him 2 specific instructions, spelling out his will for him. So in verse 13, Balaam arose in the morning and said to Balak's dignitaries, go back to your country, for the Lord will not let me go with you. Balaam only mentions he's not to go with him. He mentions nothing about cursing the people. He doesn't want to totally write off the possibility of making money and a name for himself. Okay? You see, though Balaam, like all of us, he has a weakness. His particular weakness appears to be a hunger for the flattery and attention of men. Whatever your particular weakness is, I don't know. I've just put this picture up here. I don't think this particular person, he's a famous cyclist. I don't think he's particularly after the flattery and attention of men. He's just experienced it because he's won a big race. So when a second, more influential delegation comes to entice him to do what Jehovah has specifically told him not to do, Balaam finds it an offer he simply can't refuse. He's so determined to go that Jehovah refuses to override his human will. Okay, he knows that Balaam's appetite will bring about his destruction. At first, just like Pharaoh, he had a choice, but in the end, Jehovah hardened his heart. The danger is that if we refuse Jehovah's instructions, then he will give us over to our desires. That's really worth taking a big note of as well, because that's really quite frightening, isn't it? When the Lord speaks to you, listen. Don't argue with him. Don't try to change his mind, because he doesn't change. Okay, so if this is you as well, get worried. You're wonderful. I know. This is a bit what Balaam was all about. He loved adulation and the praise of men. Verse 14, the Moabite dignitaries left. They came to Balak and said, Balaam refused to come with us. Then Balak sent other dignitaries more numerous and distinguished than the first, and they came to Balaam and said to him, thus says Balak, son of Zippor, please do not refuse to come to me. I will reward you richly, and I will do anything you ask of me, only come and damn this people for me. Lovely. 18, Balaam replied to Balak's officials, though Balak were to give me this house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, big or little, contrary to the command of the Lord my God. Here Balaam shows that he can be bought. He should have just kept a recent verse 12. I can't go with you and I can't curse this people. Okay, but he doesn't, because he's thinking adulation, and he's thinking fame. He still hasn't let go of it. Okay? Verse 19, so you two stay here overnight. Let me find out what else the Lord may say to me, which is a big mistake. What fellowship can lights have with darkness? The Moabites were descendants of Moab, as we've mentioned, along with Ammon, came from the union of Lot and his daughters. They were big on blood rights and child sacrifice. And you just ask yourself, do you do business with those of whom Jehovah does not approve, that perhaps he has already told you that you should have nothing to do with? Do you ignore Jehovah for the sake of chasing riches and esteem amongst men? Is the flattery of men more appealing to you than pleasing Jehovah? Is there something that's drawing you away? Something that's more important? Because he will let you be given over to your own desires, and it will lead to your destruction if you do not heed his word. Let's consider that Balaam is not an Israelite, okay? Although Balaam calls Jehovah his Elohim, and although he does hear from Jehovah, he has still not connected himself with the children of Israel. We must understand that he has also some very pagan ways mixed in with his beliefs. Based on his actions, Balaam reflects the existing pagan belief system of Mesopotamia. Balaam saw Jehovah as nothing but an arbitrary force with no bearing on the values of good and evil. Since the commands of such a God are not founded in moral values, there is no reason to expect this God's decisions to be consistent. Balaam believed a God had the right as a supreme being to say one thing one day and say another thing the next day. I think most Christians think the same as well, don't they? Now, according to Balaam's mindset in the future, pressing God might cause him to change his mind. Balak also believed this. So he continued to encourage Balaam by upping the ante. And these are some of the gods of Mesopotamia. Okay, sometimes when a door opens that we know or suspect is contrary to the word of Jehovah, we're tempted to think that the Almighty has blessed our plans. Instead, he is allowing us to exercise our free will. And along with that may come just enough rope to hang ourselves. When we know and follow Torah, many answers are right before us and are not meant to be open for debate. And the Lord will test us, especially if he wants to use us. He will test us first to see that we're ready. He will give us an opportunity to prove that we're a person that he can use. Hebrews 11:24-25 says this, by the way, by faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. There's a wise man, there's a humble man. I do sometimes think, what is it in the world that could just distract people or pull people away from wanting to serve the living God? What is it? The world has got nothing to offer. It's all nonsense. Moshe saw it, and imagine the life he could have lived as the Pharaoh's daughter. He could have had anything he wanted. And he was like that, nah, no thanks. He'd rather suffer affliction with the people of God. Okay, 21 says, when he arose in the morning, Balaam saddled his ass and departed with the Moabite dignitaries. Okay, so he took 2 servants with him. He's on the road to Moab, and he's loving it. Okay, this really impressive delegation have come, and he's thinking, I'm dead important, me. But God was incensed at his going, so an angel of the Lord placed himself in his way as an adversary. He was riding on his she-ass and his 2 servants alongside. Okay. Did Balaam completely follow instructions? Something else been left out again. In 22:20 it says that Balaam could go if the men come to call you. But instead it appears Balaam got out of bed, saddled his donkey and left with the princes. Jehovah had given him the order of permissible events, and it appears he violated it. Do we ever act in a similar manner? Just because we want something anyway, and we just, whatever, okay. Do we? Or do we really listen to the word of God, and do we really follow the word of God? Because that's what we need to be doing. Okay, Rashi says this, it was an angel of mercy, because the name Vuv denotes the attribute of mercy. He wanted to prevent him from sinning, for should he sin, he would perish. Okay? The Lord is merciful and gracious, isn't he? And he does try to warn us. But if we just don't listen, he will allow us just to be taken over by our own desires. Balaam keeps provoking Jehovah. We are told to ask and petition the Lord. That tells us that in Luke 11. The neighbour banging on the door. He keeps banging, doesn't he, to give his guest food in the night. And the widow who handed the evil judge for justice. The difference is that Jehovah has already stated his will on the matter. Okay? And once he's spoken, that's it. You can't help thinking of Balaam, what makes me think of this, Matthew 7:21. Remember, Balaam's a man who hears from the Lord, okay? Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. That's Torahlessness, i.e. those that lived as if my Torah was of no consequence. It doesn't really matter if you got all these gifts and everything else. What matters is if you heed his call upon your life and heed his words. Okay, 1 John 4:1. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Okay, there's a lot of people who will say, oh yeah, this is the Lord and the move of the Lord. You've got to be very careful, okay? Because there's many false prophets. Test the spirits. What you test them against? You test them against the word of God. And know this, we are as witnesses of these things, and so is also the Ruach HaKodesh, whom God hath given to them that obey him. Okay? So whatever spirit is going on in these places here, where people do not obey God, is not the Spirit of God. The only thing that we can be safe on is the word of God. That's the only thing we want to listen to. Balaam, wow, prophecy and all this, and he could speak all these big words, but he didn't listen to the instruction of the Lord God, and it was his downfall. 23 says, when the ass caught sight of the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, the ass swerved from the road and went into the fields, and Balaam beat the ass to turn it back onto the road. And the angel of the Lord then stationed himself in the lane between the vineyards with a fence on either side. And the ass, seeing the angel of the Lord, pressed herself against the wall and squeezed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he beat it again. Once more the angel of the Lord moved forward and stationed himself on a spot so narrow that there was no room to swerve right or left. And when the ass now saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam, and Balaam was furious and beat the ass with his stick. Then Jehovah opened the ass's mouth, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times? That's nuts, isn't it? It's wacky, eh? There's his face. Balaam said to the ass, you've made a mockery of me. If I had a sword with me, I'd kill you. Okay, and I've just put it, imagine if you kicked the dog and it spoke to you. And then I found a dog that looks like it's just been kicked, and imagine what it might be saying. And then I thought, I'm going to find some other dogs that look like they might have just been kicked. There's some great faces on these dogs, isn't there? I love this. I felt like that myself sometimes. Have you ever felt like that? Anyway, Balaam's response to the donkey's voice, ignore the sign and wonder and blame the donkey. So, completely ignore the fact that the donkey spoke. Threatened to slay him with a sword. Okay, that's interesting, isn't it? The man who puts on a fancy suit and prophesies with the best of them, who everyone thinks lives by the voice it's revealed, when the chips are down, actually lives by the sword. Now Rashi makes this point. This matter made him greatly contemptible in the eyes of the dignitaries. This man who was going to kill an entire nation with his mouth, yet for this she-donkey he needed weapons. Okay, so it's made a complete mockery of him, isn't it? There's another thing that's worth bearing in mind. If you do not listen to the Lord, and you go and you do your own thing, you will actually find yourself in a situation where you become a bit of a joke. The ass said to Balaam, look, I'm the ass that you've been riding all along until this day. Have I been in the habit of doing thus to you? And he answered, no. Okay, this is a point that's worth mentioning. No individual sin or an actual or perceived personality flaw in a messenger of Jehovah need disqualify his or her message. Jehovah can and sometimes does put words of true wisdom, stunning revelation in the mouths of even the most dim-witted donkeys and pompous pagans. The Lord wants to get to a message to you, he'll get it to you. And it doesn't matter how he does it, he will do it. Okay, the question is really this. How do we recognize whether what appears to be spiritual teaching, or is it cloaked in spiritual language, is under the circumstances actually the voice of another rather than the voice of Jehovah? How do we avoid the spiritual deception that is so rampant and which Messiah told us would only get worse as the end of days approaches? How do you worry for that? Because he does say throughout the scriptures, Yeshua says, don't be deceived. It keeps coming up, don't be deceived. In other words, people are going to try and deceive you. Be careful. Okay, Joshua 1:7-8 says this. Be strong and very courageous. This is one of the verses that came up when I was the Lord first called me to study his law and said that his law still applied. And I was getting loads of grief and people were saying you're around the bend and stuff, and this scripture just came on the screen on my phone, and I remember thinking, wow. It says this, only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the Torah that Moshe my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of Torah shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. Notice the word all. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Amazing that, isn't it? 2 Peter 2:1-3 says this, there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying Jehovah who brought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction, and many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. Note, many. Okay, by covetousness they will exploit you with deceptive words. Okay, I've just singled out 2 people here. There's a whole gambit of people who are speaking things that will sound lovely and wonderful and marvellous, but they're not actually speaking the truth. They're not speaking the word of God. These are people who've got many following their destructive ways, okay? But because of whom the way of truth is blasphemed, and it certainly is. For example, this chap here said that there are many ways to God the Father, not just through Yeshua. I just think, wow, that's so sad. Peter then went on to define the false prophets of the current age for us, exposing them as this. Those who walk according to the flesh, longing for and running after things that are unclean, despising authority. They are presumptuous and self-willed. They are not afraid to speak blasphemous opinions. These speak evil of the things that they do not understand. Okay. For example, the Torah. Having eyes full of adultery, and they cannot cease from sin, enticing unstable souls. Please bear in mind what adultery is. It's going after false gods. These people love false gods. They love this crazy version of Jesus, and they've got this idea of God the Father as he's either like the Wizard of Oz, that fella who's just like a big softy really behind the scenes, or he's some grumpy old person from the Old Testament that you don't have to worry about anymore. Okay, and it says here, they have a heart trained in covetous practices and accursed children. They have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. This is a thing which says one American pastor's private ministry jet is worth $20 million. Okay. The methodology of these false prophets. When they speak great swelling words of emptiness, this is still from Peter, by the way. They allure through the lust of the flesh, unbridling desires for that which is forbidden. In those who have previously fled from the aimless, undisciplined life, they promised them liberty. Okay. Ridiculous. Okay, so who or what could Balaam be a picture of? Balaam knew Jehovah. Okay, he was involved with pagan ways. He was caught up in what the world had to offer. He didn't understand the eternal promises given to Israel. He thought the Almighty could change and forsake his chosen people. Sadly, the most part of the church system sees itself as having replaced Israel, is caught up with wealth and has mixed paganism with Jehovah's ways. Okay, and that's the scripture from Jeremiah 10, which says, "Do not learn the ways of the nations. They cut a tree out of the forest, and a craftsman shapes it with his chisel. They adorn it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails, so it will not totter." Can you see that this whole thing of Balaam is proliferated in the modern day? It's really quite sad, isn't it? These false prophets. Just as bad as the situation with the big television evangelists is when you've got a run-of-the-mill pastor who's scared to preach the truth and turn from the ways of man, the ways of idolatry, to the ways of Jehovah, all because he doesn't want to offend his congregation or lose his pension. I think that's really sad as well. The truth is the truth, and the truth will always be the truth. And it tells us in Psalm 119, doesn't it? 142, it says, "Thy Torah is truth." I've heard it said that people get the teaching that they deserve. 2 Timothy 4:3 says, "The time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions." And they love it. And you get these places that are full, and people are, "Oh, this is marvelous, marvelous, marvelous." And as we've just seen, the Lord will give you over to your desires. If your heart is full of rebellion, and your heart is not for the one true God, He will give you over to these desires. It's a really scary thought, that, isn't it? Romans 16:17-18 says this, "Now I urge you, brethren, note that those who cause division, dissension, and lay out stumbling blocks, contrary to the Torah teaching which you have learned and practiced, and avoid them. For those who are such do not serve our Lord Yeshua HaMashiach, but their own belly, and by smooth words and flattering speech, they deceive the hearts of the simple." See, people read scriptures like this and they just think, "Oh, I'd hate to be one of them who were deceived." And most of the people reading it are deceived. You remember the antidote to spiritual deception which Paul taught us? He taught us this in 2 Timothy 3:14-15. "Continue in the things which you have learnt and been assured of, knowing from you whom you have learnt them, that from childhood you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith, which is in Yeshua HaMashiach." What scriptures did these people have in childhood? Okay, well, they didn't have the New Testament, did they? Because it wasn't even written or compiled at this point. He's talking about the Tanakh. So for all those people who say, "Oh, that's Old Testament, that's done away with," hang on a minute. Making you wise for salvation through faith, which is in Yeshua HaMashiach. Okay. The truth about a man or a woman's character and relationship with Jehovah is revealed not by how well he or she can spout religious talk. Jehovah is not impressed by our spiritual gifts or talents. After all, every good gift comes from him, and he can raise up stones if he needs. What is truly a treasure to Jehovah is someone whose spirituality and faithfulness to covenant survive a little trial by ordeal. And Balaam fails this, doesn't he, by beating his donkey. But please bear that in mind. The Lord isn't impressed by big, pouty, spouty, whoa, and all the things that the world just thinks are brilliant. He's not interested. He's interested in whether or not we're faithful to the covenant that we've made with him. And especially when things get a little bit tough, are we still faithful? Note that the prophet only sees what Jehovah allows him to see. In most regards, he's totally blind to what's going on in the spiritual world around him, just like us. That's why we have to trust him. Even when it seems nonsensical to us, we have to trust him. He sees the big picture, we don't. The point is that if we're ever to fulfill our destiny, as is Kedoshim, which is his holy people, and avoid chasing after religious activities that appeal to the eyes and the flesh, then we have to keep our focus on Jehovah and on Torah-grounded truth, not on charismatic speakers and eloquent teachers. Okay, there's just a million things that could distract you and send you off in the wrong direction. Hang on. We know what we've got to focus on, and that's the scriptures, which make us wise unto salvation through the Messiah. The sages of Israel have considered the contrast between Balaam and the patriarch Abraham, into whose covenant Jehovah with Jehovah, we've all been engrafted. And here's the conclusion, what the sages say on the matter. Here you've got Balaam, this big false la-di-da prophet, okay, who's actually willing to go off, even though the Lord's told him not to. Compare him actually with Abraham, who was just minding his own business, and the Lord told him to go, and he didn't even know where he was going, and he said, oh, okay, I'll go. Right? Whoever has 3 particular traits is counted among the disciples or sons of Abraham. Whoever has 3 opposite traits is among the disciples of Balaam. He who has a good eye, humility and contentedness, is a son of Abraham, while he who has an evil eye, arrogance and greed, is the son of Balaam. Okay? Rabbi Simon says this: Abraham personified humility because his mission in life was to teach that all power derives directly from God. The way of Balaam, however, is to do the absolute minimum necessary to pacify or placate Jehovah, so that he'll leave him alone to do what he really wants to do. Balaam's goal is to make Jehovah irrelevant and to focus all attention on himself, on his own ministry. Is that how some people live their lives? Is that how you live your life? Just to do the bare minimum to placate the Lord? Is that how you do it? Or do you live your life with your mission in life to teach that all power comes from the Lord God Almighty? You know, when we realize that, our lives become so much different. We realize, actually, I can do nothing of any value without the Lord God Almighty. Nothing. And when you wake up to that, it's a massive thing, because it makes you realize, wow, I shouldn't actually start anything before I've actually even prayed about it. It's just a completely different way of looking at your life. Importance. The ultimate, most deadly form of spiritual deception, you see, is not that which others practice upon us. It's that which we practice upon ourselves. That's worth taking note of. We must avoid convincing ourselves that it's okay to walk the wrong path just because Jehovah hasn't struck us dead yet, or some voice hasn't blasted out a warning. Oh, it's okay, it's okay. Note that Solomon worshipped in the temple of Jehovah in the morning, then he'd go to pagan temples with his wives and somehow managed to convince himself that this was okay. Because we're good at convincing ourselves that things are okay, aren't we? Really good. That's why the only thing we can trust is the word of God. That's the truth. Same with Balaam, but the outcome is not okay. The outcome is death. People pray about it and make it sound spiritual, even though Jehovah said no. Yeah, but I'm praying about it. Whoa. Okay. Like, this makes it okay when you finally do the wrong thing, the thing that Jehovah told you not to do in the first place. If we insist on doing that thing, then it's going to end in someone's destruction or devastation somewhere down the line, most probably ours. If you're praying about whether you should walk according to his word regarding an area of your life, then you've missed the point. Okay? If you're waiting for personal confirmation that all his Torah applies to you, then you've missed the point, and you will be waiting for a long time. If you think you're that special, that the Lord's got to come down, knock on your front door, and say, yeah, it does apply to you as well, you know. Sorry, I should have told you a long time ago. Okay, if you're asking for permission to do something that goes against his word, have a word with yourself, please. If you feel that the Spirit's leading you in a way that is contrary to the Scriptures, then it is not the Ruach HaKodesh, and believe it or not, you have been deceived. Like so many, it tells us in the Scriptures, will be. If you're going against his word and you do not feel convicted, then get very worried. And get on your knees and say, Lord, something is terribly wrong because I am sinning. Sin is to trespass the Torah. Okay? And if you're sinning and you don't feel convicted, you really need to cry out to the Lord. Something is wrong. I don't even feel convicted, Lord. Please do not abandon me. Do not give me over to my own desires, Lord. Wake me up. In your mercy, Lord, reach out to me. Verse 31 says, Then the Lord uncovered Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way. His drawn sword in his hand, thereupon he bowed right down to the ground. Okay. The angel of the Lord said to him, Why have you beaten your ass these 3 times? It is I who came out as an adversary, for the errand is obnoxious to me. You know, when the Lord uncovers our eyes one day, how foolish we might seem. And the decisions we made. Stubborn, trying to beat the dog. Come on! Because we just didn't see what was right in front of us. Because we didn't listen to the Lord God Almighty. Verse 33, And when the ass saw me, she shied away because of me those 3 times. If she had not shied away from me, you were the one I should have killed while sparing her. Okay, verse 34. Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I erred because I did not know you were standing in my way. If you still disapprove, I will turn back. Finally, he is humbled. The great prophet, he did not even see that he was near death. But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but you must say nothing except what I tell you. So Balaam went on with Balak's dignitaries. At this point, the Lord's saying, okay, you've chose this path. Go ahead. It's going to lead to your destruction, but I am still going to use you through it because I'm sovereign. If Jehovah can make a donkey speak, he can make an arrogant prophet say what he wants him to. Now when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at Moab, which is on the Arnon border at its farthest point. Balak said to Balaam, when I first sent to invite you, why didn't you come to me? Am I really unable to reward you? Right. Balaam knows that Jehovah has him on a short leash with his sword drawn. But here there's great expectation of him. He's under the spotlight and everybody is expectant. He's in a most ridiculous predicament. He knows that the Lord has just had very strong words with him. But there's all these people there, all full of expectation. Balaam said to Balak, and now that I have come to you, have I the power to speak freely? I can utter only the word that God puts into my mouth. Balaam went with Balak and they came to Kiriath Huzoth, which means city of streets, or on the city on the outskirts, which is probably a defensive city on the borders. Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep and had them served to Balaam and the dignitaries with him. Okay, so here you see, he's completely comfortable with all this pagan stuff that's going on. And in the morning, Balak took Balaam up to Baal, and from there he could see a portion of the people. This is a pagan worship site. Okay, so we're going to have a little end of part 1 there. And look at that lovely little clue as what we'll be doing next. But do have a think about how this story relates to the times that we live in, and also to our own personal walks with the Lord. I'll see you in a bit.